as I tell people often, or all the time really, when we have these classes, it's an opportunity for an interactive discussion, right? I'm not here to lecture or do anything like, it's an opportunity for all of us to discuss things and to learn together. And as we were just talking before, in terms of the best thing that we can do for ourselves is the concept of education, of learning together. And no matter what age we are, no matter where we're holding, no matter what we're doing, education is not just for the young kids in school, right? Education is for all of us. We all have to constantly be learning and growing, and that's the best thing that we can do. So again, please feel free at any time if you want to have comments, questions, this and that, please. This is an open discussion, as we say. So what I wanted to, the title is Living Happier Lives, and it's called our guidebook to ethics and morality. And we wanted to discuss, this is known as Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot are ethics of the fathers, and some people might have heard of it before. This is part of our, what's called the Torah Shebaal Peh, which is our oral Torah. When we were given, we have two Torahs in a way, we call it two Torahs, but part of there was a Torah Shebechtav, which was the written Torah, which is the Chumash, which we read every Shabbat, and all the different parshio, the portions of the Torah. Avot is ethics, again, of our fathers, and it's part of our oral Torah. And we're going to learn one of the teachings known as a Mishnah, one of the Mishnahs from Pirkei Avot. We're going to learn together, and we'll discuss it together as we learn this. And hopefully we'll be having, more and more, groups getting together and discussing. We're going to see, it's a few words. Each Mishnah is a rabbi teaching us a few words, and you're going to see, but within those words there's a lot there. And that's why it promotes a lot of discussion, it promotes a lot, thinking, this and that, discussion, people talking, saying your different ideas, and there's so many different books and commentaries that have been written on Pirkei Avot because there's so much. And so hopefully over this evening we'll be able to discuss a bit about it. You'll be able to share your thoughts, I can share some of my thoughts, and hopefully we'll all gain a lot and learn a lot. So let's begin, and I'll show you where actually one more thing just before we begin, and one more aspect of an introduction, that there are different parts of the what we call the Mishnah, which is this Torah Shebaal Peh, oral law. And one of the things is called damages. It's called Nezikin, which refers to a lot of damages. There's all these different halachot laws about, if this one damaged this one did, and the Torah the Torah involves everything. It has everything in it. So the Torah, if a person caused so-and-so damage to a person, how much does he or she have to pay back, or this or that, all these types of things. There's many discussions, and so this, called Pirkei Avot, is listed in Nezikin, meaning in damages. Now, that sounds a little funny, right? I mean, we said we're going to be discussing tonight all about ethics of our fathers, right? A little morality and ethics, right? So it's a little funny that it's listed under a whole thing about damages. Anyone have any thoughts as to why? Right? You would think under damages would be all the different books about, if this person's animal caused damage, or this person's fist caused damage, or this person's who knows what caused damage, or house caused, fire caused damage, right? But I wouldn't think a book or a whole thing about ethics and morality, right? It sounds like it kind of doesn't fit there, right? Anyone have any thoughts as to why this is included in what's called Nezikin, damages? There's two other ideas just that I wanted to share with everyone. The Rambam, which is known as Maimonides, brings down an idea that part of Nezikin, which is damage, is discussed the whole thing with all the courts and this and that, and of course everyone who's taking action, one might say, against another person, or having interpersonal relationships with another person. Obviously, as you were saying, this is probably really what might even be what the Rambam is saying. We all need ethics, right? Meaning how to deal with one another. Obviously, in terms of what we're going to do, what's going to be the next step, it needs to be done in an ethical way. It needs to be done in a moral way. It needs to be, and there's another thought, which is just the idea that if we take what's called a pit, right? If a person leaves an open pit in the middle of the ground, right? And then someone comes and slips in it or trips in it, or who knows what, it falls, damages, this and that. So that would be, one would say, well, this person who left the pit there was very irresponsible, right? Or if a person lit a fire somewhere in the middle, and then something, a fire went and caused it, say this person is very irresponsible in what they did, right? It caused physical harm or damage. So too, a person who does not have ethics and who does not have what we call midot, proper character traits and proper morals, can cause tremendous damage to another person. And meaning can cause tremendous, aside from spiritual damage, but like damage in the sense that if we try to imagine, if we're dishonest, right? A person doesn't have honesty. A person's not kind. They're not caring. A person's greedy. A person's arrogant. We can just try to begin to imagine, right, what's going to happen, right? What is this person who's a real arrogant individual, what's he going to do? He or she, they're going to, they think so highly of themselves. They think, who knows, the next thing you know, they put down everyone else in the world and everyone else around them and this and that, right? A lot can go on for a person who has arrogance, right? A person who's greedy, well, we can only begin to think, right? What happens, right? A person's greedy, they just want the right. A person who's not kind, who's not care, right? But if a person has the ethics and the morality, so then much harm, one might say, will not take place because a person will be doing the correct things. A person will be doing, and this is why that just like Nezikin, which discusses damages, they might be more physical damages, but this as well is tremendous damage that could be caused if a person doesn't have the proper character traits. Right? A lot can happen in the world, and a lot of immoral behavior and unethical behavior can happen in the world because people just are not acting in a kind, caring way and not acting. And it's very important just to realize from the beginning that, sometimes people think like, listen, I'll just be nice and I don't really need the Torah so much to help me out with that. I'll just be a nice person, and I'll be and it's funny because I guess you call it ethics and morality kind of sometimes go with like the civilization that we're in. And it kind of goes with time sometimes because you think, okay, what's ethical? Well, you think based on where you're holding now and or what's going on in the year 2013 or what's going on. But that, as we'll see, we'll see as we're learning a little bit more, the Pirkei Avot these are the ethics and the morals given from the Torah, which God gave to us from the beginning of time, and these are the ethics that don't change as civilizations change, which is a very important point. That it's not, we're going to be learning together. This is, the ethics of the Torah. So if we want to know how does the Torah, expect us or want us to act with one another, to be kind and caring to one another, it's not just what we think, well, in the year 2013 this makes sense, and maybe in the 60s, if we only just stop and think, there's a lot of differences, right, between the way people acted in the 60s as opposed to the way people act now, the way people dressed in the 60s as opposed to the way people dress now, the way people did certain things in this, right? There's a lot, so we might think that if the morals went based on the times, so things would be changing, right? And the ethics went based...
So it's basically timeless.
So it's timeless, right? Which is very important because this is something that the Torah has set up, that we're going to be learning the ethics of the Torah, which are the ethics now in the year 2013, and they were the ethics in the year, 800, and they were the ethics in the year... This has always been, and this will always be the ethics of our Torah. So it's very important just to have that mindset as we're learning to realize like what... So let's begin. If we turn to what we call the first Mishnah. You see, it's the one that I circled. So it has both the Hebrew and the English. Some people might be more familiar with the English, and that's fine. Let's discuss this first Mishnah. We'll read it a little bit in the Hebrew, then go down to the English. It begins with a very important point, and it begins with the following. It says, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, which means that Moses, our leader, right, he received the Torah from Sinai, which was from Mount Sinai. Now, what do you think that's a reference to? Meaning, we know that he received the Torah at Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, but that means that he received it from God, right? So when right away, we're setting up this step that this is not man-made over here. These ethics that are being brought, right? This is not some, great philosopher or some this or some that or some person who has some wonderful, brilliant ideas or whatever. This is straight from Hashem, these ethics that are coming, as we mentioned before, okay? So it says, Moshe kibel Torah misina. If you look down in the English, it says that Moses, right, received the Torah at Sinai. And what is the next thing it says? It says, Umasara liYehoshua. And now he transmitted it, if we look down in the to Joshua, right? So we know that Moses is, the person who took over after Moses was his helper, his student Joshua, known as Yehoshua. And then the Mishnah continues, and it's going to give us a whole list over here. And the Mishnah continues and tells us, V'Yoshua lizakanim. That means that Yoshua was Joshua. He gave it to the elders. And then it seems like the elders gave it to the prophets. And the prophets gave it to the men of the great assembly. And this is the beginning steps of this Mishnah. Now, what do you think the Mishnah is telling us? Like, why we're suddenly, we thought we were learning ethics, right? Right, we're about to probably coming here, we're thinking, right? The rabbi said we're going to learn a whole thing about ethics. So far we don't yet have anything about ethics, right? Not yet, hasn't yet come. And this is the first, this is like the beginning. You would think like the startup would be like maybe some big, ethics, who knows what. But like so far, this thing here right now in Del Sur in the year 2013, here in San Diego, this is the exact same Torah, this is the exact same oral law that Moses receives at Har Sinai. And again, as we mentioned before, just that point, it's a very important point to realize that, again, it's not a man-made thing. This is something that came right, so it seems like that's a very important step to have clear, and the Mishnah wants to make that very clear right at the beginning, that pull. And sometimes, as many people are probably familiar, they heard of these the new reports that came out, right? That when you hear just the levels of assimilation and the levels of people not being so involved, and you think to yourself, well, if there's something which is called this Masorah is a transmission, our heritage, right? Which it goes back all the way to Sinai, right? It goes from it's a continuity, you know what I mean? It keeps continuing on and on and on. So you just think to yourself, like, why is it that I guess we're having such problem? People are not very involved, one might say. People are not very taking advantage. I wanted to share with you actually the following very cute joke that I heard. It goes like this. It says that there are three Jews. They were at a country club, and they were discussing their ethnic origins. And so he says the first one said, he says that my father was from the old country, and his name was Goldsmith, and he worked in gold, and he made a good living. But this person says that when I took over the business, he says I changed my name to Gold. So the second one says, oh, that's interesting. He says my father also came from the old country. And he says that his name was Silverstein. And why? He worked in silver. And also he made a good living. But he says that when I took over his company, I shortened my name to Silver. So suddenly the third guy comes along. And the third guy says, my father came from the old country too. And he says his name was Schneider. So he says that he was a tailor. And he always struggled to make a living. It was very difficult for him. And he says he taught me the trade, and I struggled too. So he says one day I turned to heaven, I turned to God, he says, and I prayed and I told him, Lord, help me succeed in business, and we'll be partners. So he says then, since then, he says, my business has become a great success. So he said, the other two guys, they look at this guy and they say, oh, come on. Do you really expect us to believe that story? That's ridiculous. And he says, sure. He says, haven't you ever heard of Lord and Taylor? And when we were familiar Jacob and his sons, right, which are known as the 12 tribes, the Shvatim, 12 tribes of Israel. And even though there were different time periods where, within the Egyptian society, yet the Jewish community, they were thriving, and they were staying within their culture, within their heritage. And so he asked the following question. He says, it's very interesting. I mean, what was the secret of success for the Jewish community? Like, how did they continue? How did they were involved within the world? Now, Egypt itself was like the total, one might say, antithesis of the opposite of a Torah type of Judaism and life. So how did they? And it's actually very interesting. The Torah tells us the following, and the sentence says in Genesis. So it tells us the following idea, and I just want to read you this sentence because it's a very, very important sentence, and it talks about how Judah was sent ahead when Jacob was coming to the land. So Judah was sent ahead, and the sentence says the words that he sent Shalach Lefanav Yosef, that he sent Judah was sent towards Yosef, and why it says Lehorot Lefanav. And Lehorot is a very interesting word, and the English translation over here of the word is that it says to prepare ahead of him in Goshen. And there's other interpretations that are actually brought down. I just want to read you something. Rashi, which is one of our main commentaries on the Chumash, on the Torah, so he quotes something and he says the following. I'll read you. He actually explains it over here in the English in a very nice way. So I'll just read you this English. Listen to what he says. Meaning, why was he sent ahead? He says the following, that it says the word to teach, which implies, this word lehorot, to teach, which implies that Jacob dispatched Judah to Goshen to establish a house of study. He says this set a precedent for all Jewish history, that historically the first priority of Jewish communities has always been Torah education. For the soul of the nation is the Torah, and without it we are not a nation. And meaning to say that the sentence was saying that he sent Yehuda ahead of him, that Yehuda should go set up the land, that there should be schools set up, there should be Jewish education set up. Now try to imagine what this means. That means before any synagogues, imagine you come to a new land, you come to a new place, it's totally, there's nothing there. So what's the first step? What's the most important thing, it sounds, what you're setting up? It sounds like it's not necessarily the synagogue, and it's not necessarily the Jewish community center, or who knows what, or this or that. It sounds like the schooling, the education, was of utmost importance. Why? What do you think?
Carry on the.
That's right, because that's it, and it's not even. That's true. That's a very good point. That's right. It transmits things, and it's not just, sometimes people tell me that line, and I always say to them when they tell me the following line, I always respond the same thing back. So I'll tell you what people tell me, and I'll tell you what I respond back. People always say like, oh, it's for the kids, it's for the kids, and the kids need, we need these. This is the future, and that's definitely true, but it's not just.
That's only part.
It's not just, education is for all of us, right? For each and every one of us. We all have to be growing and learning, and they always give the example, right? A kid, when a person goes, a little child, right? They go to the doctor, right? So they have their checkups, so when the child, right? So everyone, right? I'm sure you know now from your grandchildren, this and that, and different people from their own, when they say, oh, after, you come back after a few months later, oh, the child has grown so-and-so and this and that, and so that's wonderful, it's very nice. But as adults as well, right, how often do we look back and say, oh, well, 5 years ago I was this, and now right, we also have to be growing, and we also have to be, and I don't mean physically growing, I mean like we also have to be mentally and spiritually and growing in terms of our knowledge and in terms of our being connected to the Torah. And so it sounds like the idea was that they sent, Yehuda was sent ahead, why? To teach and to set up these schools of houses of study, schools of study. And there's also just the idea, which actually will tie back to the joke, the idea that also as a Jewish people, that they kept hold of their names, which is actually coming back to the joke, that many, you'll hear many times, very often, that like when people, right, they changed their names, right, they came to America and everyone had to, go with the times, you know what I mean, go with the things, go with, next thing you know, their name used to be so-and-so and now it became, whatever it is, as we saw in the joke, right, Silverstein to Silver, this one to that one, and these type of things, and the idea was, when they were in Egypt, they held on to their names, they held on to other, they had their language, certain safeguards which kept them still connected, and very much, which is very important, that if we as a people just say, okay, now we're in America, so let's just become total American, and that's not, we have to hold on to our, and again, it doesn't mean that we don't become part of society, we live in America, obviously we're, but a person needs to hold on to their, these aspects in terms of their names and language and these type of things to help prevent, help prevent that. So the Mishnah then goes on, and we'll discuss further, discuss that idea, very soon further. But let's go on in the Mishnah. It's going to tell us, as we said before, that it talked in very short and sweet words, one might say, right? It's a very
5-page version.
Right, the small, that's right, you got it. And the idea, right, the idea very much is that, listen, we're here, there's a lot in there, so let's try to figure out, I guess, for ourselves, what we can figure out from this. So what is let me just get it over here, I'll share with you first the following. It says there was a rabbi story, and it goes like this. So it discusses about this rabbi who delivered a 40-minute sermon, right? How many people would want to hear a rabbi who delivers a 40-minute sermon?
Or it's a matter, or in some synagogues, it's a matter of how many people can stay awake during a.
How many people can stay awake? Right. So as a rabbi, I don't ask these questions. So anyway, but. As by the way, there's many, there's a lot of studies actually, and it's actually, you always wondered what all the rabbis talk about amongst themselves when it comes to rabbi conversation. There's a lot of studies when it comes to people's attention span as to how long, and it's not long at all. Whether it's they say sometimes 7 minutes, sometimes 8. Sometimes a little bit long, maybe, but like it's not, it's far from 40 minutes, you know what I mean? But, and again, there's always exceptions, and there's always, so he says the following: there was a 40-minute sermon given. After the services, there was a man, he approached the rabbi, and he came over and he said, listen, I produced this popular magazine-type radio program, and, I heard your sermon, and I was just wondering if you could possibly reduce your sermon to a 3-minute message that you could say from that sermon. So this rabbi, he was thrilled at the opportunity. He was very special. Wow, he's going to be on the radio. He's going to be this and that. It's very nice. So he says he's thinking, wow, I can now reach millions of people with my words. This is going to be great. And the rabbi eagerly, he jumps at the opportunity. He says, yes, of course, I could get my message across in 3 minutes. So the radio producer looked at him, he says, so why didn't you? And if we think about the idea, the concept is that, sometimes people, they do talk a lot, right? And people say, and if you really can get that same idea across so why are we wasting our words? We shouldn't be wasting. But Pirkei Avot is that type of concept, that it's these short ideas, but yet very meaningful ideas. So let's see what the Mishnah tells us. It says the following. It says, Heim amru shlosha devarim, which means if we look in the English, it tells us in the middle of that 1:1, it says, they, the latter, stated 3 principles. And so here's the first one. It says, Hevu mitunim badin, which means a person should be deliberate in judgment. The Mishnah really, one might say, if they look at it just from like a first look, you might say be deliberate in judgment. I don't know, maybe we're just talking to the judges, right? The judges, it's talking about judgment. So, you're talking to a judge. I guess we want to set up, remember we said this is part of Nezikin, damages. So maybe we want to just, set things straight by the way that a judge, it's very important when you're judging a case. You're hearing two sides, the two litigants. I guess a very simple understanding would be if a person looks at this, you say, okay, listen, a judge judges a case. You have two litigants in front of you, and there are many halachot, which means many laws as to exactly how things must be done. I remember when I was learning for my smicha test, which is the test to become a rabbi, so part of the test was a test all about it's known as Choshen Mishpat. It's a part of our Shulchan Aruch, which is our code of law, all about the way judgments and how a judge judges things and what happens in courts and law and this and that was a lot. That was a big part of it as well. And the halacha goes through, the law goes through very much in terms of everything. I mean, the Torah says it very clearly. Everything must be very fair in the sense that if you have two litigants and one appears at one time and as opposed to the other, they're not coming in, they both have to come at the same time. They both have to be there. One can't, be looking in like better clothing in a way or looking like who knows what better because it might be what we call a shochat, a bribe to the judge. The judge might be a little persuaded one way as opposed to the other. And therefore be deliberate in judgment. The simple understanding, or one of the understandings definitely would be telling the judge, listen, we're setting up our laws, our court systems, but it has to be very ethical. What does it mean to be very ethical? Very straight, right? We're straight. This is the Torah. The Torah is emet, right? And as Jane was pointing out before, right? Truthful. It's totally truthful. This is 100%. We're not the type of, it's not like the Torah, where you have a person slip another guy at 20, you know what I mean? And tell the judge, listen, help me out or I'll buy you some, it's not going to be totally straight. So that would be deliberate in judgment. The judge has to hear things very clearly. He has to come, no bribes, no this, no that, and any form of bribes. Now, you were pointing out, remind me your name again?
Roz.
Roz is pointing out that isn't everyone a judge? What do we say?
Yes.
Yes, 100%, right? So all the time we are judging things and we're involved in decisions, right? And we're involved, so we're our own judges of things. So the Mishnah is not just talking to a judge per se. The Mishnah is talking to each and every one of us, telling us that, we are involved, whether it's with our spouse, whether it's with our children, whether it's with our people in our community, our friends, or this or that, or our parent, whoever we're being involved with, and whoever we're all the time, every single day, decisions happen and we're judging things. So if we're not going to be honest with ourselves and try to be as honest as we can and be as deliberate as we can, and it comes up very much, especially being involved in teaching as well. So it comes up very, not very much, but like at times, if you have a student, sometimes will think like, this person, they'll for whatever reason feel that things aren't fair to them. Or feel, now whether they're right or they're wrong, it's definitely not a good thing that they're feeling that way. You have to definitely, correct that and help that out and try to figure out why they're, but it's very important always for us to realize that we have to be very straight, we have to be very, and if not, there's tremendous repercussions on that. And it really goes, it can make such repercussions to the fact that things cannot, in a way, everything can always be changed around, you never know, but like it can go to the point where it could become very difficult, I guess, to change things around. So this is, again, our first idea of having mitzuna badin, that being very, very deliberate in judgment, that we ourselves are judges, and being that each and every one of us are judges, we have to be very careful in terms of how we talk to people, in terms of what we say to people. Book of the code of law, of what we call the Shulchan Aruch, meaning like I was discussing before, there are certain parts of our code of law which we discuss, which are in the books. You know what I'm saying? He always say there's another book. What's that book? It's called Seichel. Right? Our Seichel is our right?
Common sense.
Right, common sense. But it's a little bit more, meaning common sense is the word that's always used nowadays. They say common sense. Common sense is not really what Seichel is. A person's Seichel which is hopefully guided by the Torah and guided by the lessons of the Torah and the teachings of the Torah. So it's not just like someone waking up saying, oh, I have some common sense, totally that we're being guided by, because the Torah, what's in the Torah is what teaches us what's right and wrong. So it was hopefully that our minds are being trained like the Torah.